Italian horror in the 70s didn't play by anyone's rules. While American cinema was discovering gritty realism and British horror was perfecting Gothic elegance, Italy created something entirely its own. Giallo mysteries drenched in style, Gothic nightmares that prioritized atmosphere over logic, and films where color, music, and pure visual craft mattered more than coherent plotting. This is where Dario Argento, Lucio Fulci, and Mario Bava transform murder mysteries into fever dreams, where Ennio Morricone and Goblin scores became as important as the imagery, where cinematographers like Vittorio Storaro painted with light and shadow, creating frames so beautiful they belonged in museums even as bodies piled up within them. Tonight we're exploring 10 films that capture Italian horror at its most visually striking and narratively strange, from Paranoia Giallo, where reality bends, to witchcraft academies built on architecture and dread, to psychosexual mysteries that blur past and present. These aren't films that explain themselves or apologize for their excesses. They're pure cinema as sensory assault, where style becomes substance and every frame drips with malevolent beauty. The Fifth Chord, 1971. Luigi Bazzoni's The Fifth Chord is Giallo as Antonioni-influenced art film, a murder mystery more interested in alienation and atmosphere than typical genre thrills. An alcoholic journalist investigates a series of attacks on people connected to his social circle, each victim targeted on days of personal significance. As he digs deeper, the investigation becomes personal odyssey through Rome's empty spaces and hollow relationships. Franco Nero stars as the journalist, playing him with detached cool that barely masks self-destructive tendencies. He's an unreliable protagonist. His drinking, his fragmented memory, his complicated relationships all make him potential suspect as much as investigator. Sylvia Monti and Pamela Tiffin play women in his orbit, each harboring secrets that complicate the mystery. Bazzoni and cinematographer Vittorio Storaro create stunning visual compositions, Rome shot in cold blues and stark architectural frames that emphasize isolation and geometric precision. The city becomes a maze of modern buildings and empty piazzas where characters are dwarfed by their environments. Ennio Morricone's score is jarringly experimental, using industrial sounds and discordant elements that create unease rather than traditional thriller tension. The murder sequences are staged with visual flair but minimal gore, emphasizing the act's psychological impact over exploitation value. The film's pace is deliberately slow, prioritizing mood and character over plot mechanics. Red herrings and ambiguous clues accumulate without the typical giallo reveals, keeping audiences uncertain about both killer identity and protagonist reliability. The Fifth Chord divides giallo fans. Some find it pretentious and slow, others consider it the genre's most artistically ambitious entry. It represents Italian thriller cinema, reaching toward art house respectability while maintaining genre framework, creating something beautiful, cold, and genuinely unsettling. Short Night of Glass Dolls, 1971. Aldo Lotto's directorial debut is Italian giallo filtered through Kafkaesque nightmare. A journalist awakens to discover he's completely paralyzed, mistaken for dead, and about to be autopsied. Conscious but unable to move or communicate, he lies in the morgue while his mind races through the events that led to this moment, his girlfriend's disappearance in Prague, and his investigation into a conspiracy involving powerful figures and missing young women. The film's structure is brilliantly unsettling. We experience the protagonist's helpless terror in the present, while flashbacks reveal his doomed investigation. Jean Sorel plays the paralyzed journalist with voiceover narration that conveys mounting panic as medical examiners prepare to dissect his living body. The Prague locations provide Cold War atmosphere. Beautiful but oppressive, a city where Western journalists asking wrong questions tend to vanish. Lotto builds dread through the ticking clock structure. Each flashback brings us closer to understanding the conspiracy, while the present tense sequences show doctors moving methodically toward the autopsy. The film's treatment of institutional power and conspiracy feels genuinely paranoid, suggesting corruption that extends from street level to the highest echelons of society. The Giallo elements, mysterious disappearances, amateur investigation, conspiracy, blend with body horror and political thriller. Ennio Morricone's score adds layers of unease, his music shifting between melancholic and nightmarish as the dual timelines converge. The practical effects for the paralysis sequences make the protagonist's condition viscerally uncomfortable. Short Night of Glass Dolls represents Giallo at its most cerebral and disturbing, prioritizing psychological horror and conspiracy paranoia over elaborate kill sequences. The climax delivers both narrative resolution and visceral horror that justified the film's patient buildup. The House with Laughing Windows, 1976. In a small Italian village surrounded by swamps and silence, a restorer is hired to uncover a church fresco painted by a long-dead artist known for disturbing imagery. As he begins his work, whispers spread through the town, stories of madness, murder, and the painter's obsession with capturing real suffering. The further he digs into the art, the more he realizes that the horror behind it never truly ended. Pupi Avati's The House with Laughing Windows is one of the great slow-burn mysteries of Italian horror, a film steeped in dread rather than spectacle. Instead of Giallo-style excess or flashy violence, it builds unease through atmosphere. Decaying buildings, strange villagers, and the constant hum of something unseen. The beauty of the Italian countryside becomes a trap, its warmth concealing rot beneath the surface. Avati directs with painterly precision, blending mystery, folklore, and psychological terror into a seamless whole. Every clue feels cursed, every smile conceals something sinister. By the time the truth is revealed, the viewer feels as trapped as the protagonist. Surrounded by darkness, hiding in plain sight. Unearthed by horror fans decades later, The House with Laughing Windows has earned its place as a masterpiece of mood and suggestion. Proof that true fear doesn't need spectacle, only silence and time to take root. Suspiria, 1977. Dario Argento's Suspiria is a fever dream of color, sound, and violence, a film where style becomes horror itself. The story follows Susie Bannion, an American ballet student who travels to Germany to attend a prestigious dance academy, only to discover that the school hides a sinister secret. From the moment she arrives, reality feels off-kilter, as if the very walls are alive with menace. Jessica Harper brings a quiet vulnerability to Susie, grounding the story even as Argento drenches every frame in surreal atmosphere. The supporting cast adds to the unease. Alida Valli as the severe instructor, Udo Kier as the cryptic psychiatrist, and Joan Bennett in one of her final roles as the mysterious headmistress. Yet the true characters here are the building itself, and the overwhelming sense of dread that seeps into every scene. Argento and cinematographer Luciano Tovoli shoot in bold, unnatural hues, blood reds, electric blues, and poisonous greens, transforming the screen into a nightmarish painting. Every hallway, stained glass window, and flickering light feels designed to disorient and terrify. The violence is operatic. From the infamous opening murder to the final confrontation, Argento stages each set piece as a grotesque ballet of gore and beauty. Goblin's pounding prog rock score only intensifies the chaos, with its chants, whispers, and relentless rhythms embedding themselves in the viewer's nerves. It bypasses logic, operating like a nightmare where the rules don't matter. Only the feeling of helplessness, of being swallowed by something larger, older, and more sinister than you can comprehend. It's horror as art, and art as horror, a cinematic spell that continues to haunt long after the lights come up. Torso, 1973. In a quiet Italian university town, a string of brutal murders begins to spread panic among a group of young art students. Someone in a black scarf is stalking women through the winding streets and misty countryside, killing with surgical precision. When a few survivors retreat to a secluded villa for safety, the killer follows, and the real nightmare begins. Sergio Martino's Torso is often considered the bridge between the stylized giallo thrillers of the early 70s and the slasher films that followed. It combines the visual elegance of Italian horror, bold color, hypnotic camera work, and eerie jazz, with a raw intensity that would soon define American exploitation. Susie Kendall leads the cast with quiet vulnerability, grounding the film's violence in genuine fear rather than spectacle. What sets Torso apart is Martino's control of tone. The first half builds with erotic tension and mystery. The second turns into pure survival horror, stripped of music and glamour. What's left is something cold, human, and terrifyingly real. Stylish, shocking, and influential, Torso feels like the moment 1970s horror stopped looking at the killer as art and started feeling their breath on the back of your neck. Footprints on the Moon, 1975. A translator wakes up with no memory of the past 3 days, plagued by fragments of a disturbing science fiction film she can't remember watching. Following cryptic clues and half-remembered images, she travels to a desolate coastal town where the residents seem to know her, but she has no recollection of ever being there before. Directed by Luigi Bazzoni and co-written by Mario Finelli, Footprints on the Moon, original title Le Orme, is one of Italian cinema's most haunting psychological mysteries, a film that operates more like a waking nightmare, where nothing is quite reliable and every answer leads to more unsettling questions. Florinda Bolkan gives a mesmerizing performance as Alice, embodying confusion and dread with quiet intensity. She moves through the film like someone trying to wake from a dream they're not sure is theirs, constantly off balance in environments that should be familiar but feel fundamentally wrong. Klaus Kinski appears in brief but unforgettable sequences from the fictional film within a film, playing an astronaut abandoned on the moon, imagery that mirrors Alice's own isolation and abandonment. Cinematographer Vittorio Storaro bathes everything in amber light and deep shadows, creating a sun-bleached Mediterranean setting. The film refuses easy explanations, embracing ambiguity and dream logic in ways that frustrated some audiences but captivated others. It's horror as existential mystery, less interested in monsters than in the terror of losing yourself completely. Lisa and the Devil, 1973. Lisa and the Devil, directed by Mario Bava in 1973, is a surreal, nightmarish exploration of Gothic horror that thrives on ambiguity and dreamlike terror. The film follows Lisa, a young woman trapped in a mansion filled with sinister figures, ghostly apparitions, and cryptic rituals. Time and space distort as she moves through the house, creating a disorienting sense of inescapable doom where reality bends and the living coexist uneasily with the dead. Bava's visual mastery dominates every frame. Candlelit halls, deep shadows, and vivid, almost painterly colors immerse the viewer in an environment that feels both beautiful and dangerous. Figures appear and vanish without explanation, and the narrative is intentionally fragmented, enhancing the dreamlike quality. The mansion itself becomes a character, labyrinthine, oppressive, and alive with malevolent intent. The film thrives on psychological tension rather than overt violence. Lisa's journey is as much about navigating fear and isolation as it is about escaping literal danger. Themes of repression, forbidden desire, and fate intertwine, making every encounter feel layered and unpredictable. The combination of horror, surrealism, and the Gothic aesthetic places Lisa and the Devil squarely in the realm of VHS-era oddities, films meant to captivate, disturb, and leave a lasting impression. By the end, the mansion's horrors linger in the mind, not just through fear but through fascination. Lisa and the Devil is a hypnotic, unsettling experience, a prime example of the type of strange, unforgettable horror that make obscure movies so endlessly compelling. Hatchet for the Honeymoon, 1970. Mario Bava's Hatchet for the Honeymoon opens like a fairy tale about love and marriage, and then quietly dismembers both. Set in the glittering world of fashion, it follows John Harrington, a handsome designer with a secret obsession. He's a serial killer compelled to murder brides in hopes of unlocking a repressed childhood memory. Unlike the slashers that would dominate the next decade, Bava's film isn't about shock or suspense. It's about descent. Every frame pulls us deeper into John's unraveling mind, a place where beauty and violence have become inseparable. Bava shoots the film with an almost painterly precision. Saturated reds, mirrored surfaces, and elegant camera moves turn Harrington's life into a surreal museum of vanity and guilt. Stephen Forsythe plays him as both charming and haunted, his voiceover offering a disturbingly calm window into madness. When his ghostly wife begins to torment him, part conscience, part curse, the film slips fully into the psychological horror that defined Italian cinema of the era. It stands as one of Bava's most personal works, a bridge between the Gothic horror of the 60s and 70s, the Giallo thrillers that would soon dominate the European scene. It's stylish, strange, and deeply introspective, a film about a man dissecting love the same way he dissects his victims. Beneath its surface, beauty lies a truth that defined 1970s horror, that the most terrifying monsters often hide behind perfect smiles. The Killer Nun, 1979. The Killer Nun is one of those movies that could only have come out of Italy in the late 70s. A mix of religious guilt, psychological breakdown, and lurid exploitation that somehow manages to feel both shocking and sincere. Released in 1979 and directed by Giulio Berruti, it sits right at the intersection of art house melodrama and grindhouse scandal. The film follows Sister Gertrude, a nun recovering from brain surgery, who begins to spiral into madness. Her faith unravels, her behavior becomes erratic, and soon she's lashing out in increasingly violent and immoral ways. The convent around her turns into a maze of repression and desire, where prayer, addiction, and murder start to blend together. Anita Ekberg gives the film its strange gravity. Her performance walks a tightrope between tragic and unhinged, turning what could have been pure exploitation into something oddly sympathetic. You feel the sickness, the confusion, and the slow moral decay creeping into every scene. Like much of Italy's Nunsploitation wave, The Killer Nun uses shock to explore themes the church would rather avoid: hypocrisy, temptation, and the human weakness beneath devotion. The cinematography is clinical and detached, full of sterile corridors and cold light that make the violence feel even more disturbing. It's easy to dismiss a title like The Killer Nun as trash, but there's more going on under the surface. It's about control, guilt, and what happens when the institutions meant to save us are the ones that break us. When it arrived on home video in the 80s, it became infamous, banned in several countries, and lumped in with the video nasties. But over time, it's gained recognition as one of the smarter, moodier entries in the genre. A film that shocks you first, then leaves you thinking afterward. The Killer Nun isn't subtle, but it's unforgettable. A strange collision of faith and madness that could only have been born in 1979 Italy. Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, aka The Living Dead at Manchester Morgue, 1974. In the mid-70s, when zombie movies were starting to claw their way into horror history, Spain and Italy teamed up to give us Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. Directed by Jorge Grau, it takes the classic undead formula and gives it a fresh twist with a dose of environmental paranoia. The story follows George, played by Ray Lovelock, who's just trying to make his way through the English countryside. A chance run-in with a young woman named Edna, played by Christina Galbo, ends up pulling him into something far darker than either of them could have expected. Local scientists are experimenting with a new kind of technology that uses ultrasonic radiation to kill insects. But of course, this being horror, that little invention has a side effect. It wakes up the dead. Suddenly, the quiet green countryside is crawling with flesh-hungry zombies. George and Edna find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time, getting blamed for a string of murders while the real culprits, the undead, keep multiplying. Standing in their way is an inspector, played by Arthur Kennedy, whose arrogance and prejudice only make things worse. His refusal to see what's really happening turns him into almost as big a threat as the zombies themselves. What sets this one apart from other zombie flicks of the time is how it mixes social commentary with its scares. Grau uses the film to talk about pollution, technology, and the dangers of messing with nature. The English countryside looks gorgeous on screen, but it's constantly contrasted with gore and decay, driving home the film's ecological warning. And speaking of gore, the zombie attacks here are brutal and memorable, with some of the best practical effects of the era. It doesn't shy away from showing the flesh-eating horror, but it's never just shock for shock's sake. Everything ties back into that uneasy balance between humanity, science, and nature. Let Sleeping Corpses Lie is often compared to Romero's Night of the Living Dead, and while the influence is obvious, it brings its own flavor to the genre. It's atmospheric, it's unsettling, and it has just enough brains, no pun intended, to make it more than just another zombie movie. Nearly 50 years later, it still holds up as one of the standout Euro horror takes on the undead. If you're a fan of zombie cinema and you haven't checked it out, this one's absolutely worth digging up. If you love discovering forgotten horror and cult cinema, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the films time forgot. Thanks for watching, and remember, always be kind and rewind, because every movie is someone's favorite.